Okay, so this is stop 4. We're at Erb and Caroline streets at the corner of Waterloo Park on the east side. This is a busy section of on the edge of Uptown Waterloo, and there are a few things that we can see here that I'd like to point out. The first is the second research centre, the first being the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics that we just passed on our left. The second research institute is the Centre for International Governance Innovation, which you can see on Erb Street behind the Seagram's Distillery, which is the building with the Shopify sign on it. This was established in 2001 with public and private funding, including $20 million from Jim Borsili, the co-founder of Research in Motion, and Mike Lazaridis, who also contributed $1 million to this project. CIGI is actually located within Seagram's Distillery, which is a well-known whiskey brewery, which you can see right on the corner of Erb and Caroline across the street from where we are now. That's the building with the Shopify sign on it that I mentioned before. Seagram's Distillers was at one point the largest distiller of alcoholic beverages in the world. It produced whiskey at this site with Waterloo, Ontario on the bottom of the bottles. The Seagram's family business broke up in 2000 after 2 decades of disastrous management decisions, which were an attempt to diversify the business into natural resources and entertainment. The company's headquarters were in Montreal. So, as I mentioned before, on the side of the building we can see the Shopify sign. Though Shopify are no longer kind of really located there. I think they still lease the building. But when the pandemic hit, Shopify's CEO announced very publicly on Twitter that the company would be digital by default, which means 100% work from home. Or in other words, nobody would return to the office and everybody would be working from home full-time and permanently. This is an interesting move because Shopify had invested a significant amount of time, energy and money into 2 offices in Waterloo, one being the one that we see here in the Seagram's Distillery and the other just down the street by Willis Way in Uptown, which you can kind of see from here. It's opposite the LRT stop on Caroline Street. So theoretically you can kind of work from anywhere in Canada or in some locations abroad for Shopify now. But because the offices were occupied only 2 years ago, lots of Shopify workers still likely live in Waterloo and Kitchener. So that's just a little something about the Shopify office, which was in this previous Seagram's Distillery. It's quite impressive inside, as it's about 4 stories high, and they've retained all that kind of height in the building itself. There's also a museum in the front of the building that Shopify had to retain for historical preservation reasons. That museum is unfortunately not open to the public right now, but perhaps it will be once Shopify's lease on the building is up. Another thing to note that you saw, I think, on the video between this stop and the previous stop, the Laurel Creek actually goes under Uptown, just north of us, at Caroline, at the edge of the park. It's a very common feature of a lot of cities in North America, essentially hiding a water feature by putting it underground. It's a common water management approach. It's unfortunate because kind of modern planning models would actually make a feature of something like a creek running through an urban environment, right? You could have drinks by the water or dinner by the water or something like that. But the creek goes under the city. It actually passes underneath the Seagram's building because it provided a key water source for the distillery. And the creek re-emerges beside City Hall on the other side of King Street, which is our last stop on this field trip. So I'll talk more about the creek once we get to that spot where it re-emerges from under the city. But that's just something to note as we're at this stop. Do take a look at the video that took you from the previous stop to this one, as I walk right past the spot where the creek goes under Uptown from right beside Silver Lake.